began with a critical look at a video decoding why thinkers like Jason Reza Jorjani utilize the Promethean archetype alongside Saturnian-Satanic mysticism as a launchpad. Prometheus represents the quintessential mythos of rebellion, the spark of stolen fire brought down to humanity. Yet, when we pair this Promethean rebellion with the Mithraic and John the Baptist structuralisms, and cross-reference them with alternative historical reconstructions like those of Ralph Ellis, Tracy Twyman, Marco Allegro, and Ian Waite, a far more intricate and fragmented cartography emerges. At the center of this web lies a provocative realization. Many biblical and mythological archetypes are not distinct, isolated historical persons, but recurring motifs of dissociative identity dynamics, manifestations where multiple historical personalities, titles, or spiritual currents converge within a single physical lineage or body, operating through a cyclical script of murder, betrayal, and the return of encoded energies. First, Enoch, Metatron, and the internal Merkabah. The transformation of the patriarch Enoch into the supreme archangel Metatron represents the ultimate ascent of human consciousness into the divine chariot. The etymology of ascent, the name Metatron does not carry the suffix "l". Scholars indicate it likely derives from the Greek phrase metathronon, or metator. The internal technology. In esoteric traditions, this translation serves as the blueprint for transcendent awakening, mapping directly onto the mechanics of neurotheology, the intentional dismantling of default mode processing to access hyperdimensional geometry, inner architecture, and unitive states. Entheogenic and ascetic vectors are essentially engineering the Merkabah internally within the biological vehicle. To properly contextualize this, esoteric traditions carefully distinguish between the two biblical Enochs. 1. The line of Cain. Adam Ratero Ero Cain Ratero Ero Enoch. After Cain was banished for killing Abel, he built the very first city mentioned in the Bible, naming it Enoch, after his son. This Enoch is associated with the earthly establishment of civilization, material technology, and worldly architecture. 2. The line of Seth. Adam Ratero, Seth Ratero, Enosh Ratero, Kenan Ratero, Mahalalel Ratero, Jared Ratero Enoch. This Enoch is the seventh generation from Adam, who famously walked with God and was taken without seeing death. It is this specific Enoch who forms the basis of the mystical texts, celestial ascension, and angel lore. Second, the Isis vector versus Mithraic plasma. Concurrently, the diversion of the Isis vector manifests as a low-level frequency. The fixation on localized anthropomorphic or dogmatic constructs, such as the sanitized exoteric layers we see in modern Christianity, represents a downward step on the cosmic scale. It is a degraded low-vibration simulation designed to manage human consciousness through guilt, linear time, and emotional containment. Against this, ancient mystery traditions like Mithraism operated as high-voltage physics. The Tauroctony imagery and Mithraic cave architecture were astronomical and energetic laboratories. By aligning rituals with zodiacal windows of confluence, equinoxes, and stellar processions, initiates sought to tap directly into the cosmic plasma of the sun. They utilized electromagnetic, stellar radiation as a vehicle for consciousness expansion and ultimate transcendence. When figures like the Persian forerunner Zoroaster engaged with these cosmic axes, they were tuning human neurology directly to the high-frequency grid of the cosmos, bypassing terrestrial religious bureaucracy entirely. Third, from Mansi to Bernays, the engineering of the matrix topography. How do you control a species trapped in a carbon-based cellular matrix? Through the systematic hijacking of symbols. 1. Ancient Mansian sigils. Priests and sorcerers originally used Mansi and encoded mystical sigils to anchor specific celestial archetypes into physical reality. 2. The Bernays topography. Fast-forwarding to the 20th century, Edward Bernays took these ancient occult mechanics of mass psychology and industrialized them. The result is the modern landscape of existential branding, a totalizing manufactured topography where human desire, attention, and spiritual longing are intercepted by corporate sigils and consumerist cults. Fourth, the Templar infiltration and the alchemical calcination. This leads directly to the central paradox of institutional occult history. Why would an elite martial spiritual order, dedicated to the divine sublime, intentionally corrupt, fracture, and absorb themselves into the machinery of worldly control? The Vatican, centralized banking, and the sovereign military order of Malta, just to safeguard a relic. For an order initiated into high-level Gnosticism, the Holy Grail was never a golden cup hidden under floorboards. It was a biological, energetic, and dimensional technology. 1. The Great Submersion. When the Papal Capetian Alliance moved to crush the Knights Templar in 1307, the order possessed wealth, maritime fleets, and esoteric intelligence that threatened to shatter the emerging European nation-state and banking apparatus. 2. Alchemical calcination. Rather than fighting a feudal conventional war, they chose alchemical calcination, breaking down their structure so it could be resynthesized within the rising systems of power. 3. Becoming the architecture. By funneling their financial networks into the embryonic roots of centralized banking and embedding themselves within the infrastructure of Malta and the Vatican, they ensured their survival not as an open army, but as the hidden operating system of Western civilization. To protect the Grail, understood not as an artifact, but as the custodial lineage of bloodline gnosis and dimensional access, they had to become the very architecture of the prison matrix itself. They wore the chains of the system to quietly hold the keys to its escape hatches. Fifth, the Melchizedek enigma and temporal paradoxes. The unique framing of Melchizedek as a character involving time loops, eternity, or temporal paradoxes stems directly from the famous description in the New Testament. In the book of Hebrews, Melchizedek is described as being without father or mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Because he bursts into the historical timeline of Genesis out of nowhere, interacts with Abraham, and vanishes without any record of birth or death, he creates a massive theological and narrative enigma. This description has sparked three major modern mythos and paradox theories. 1. The pre-incarnate Christ paradox. Many theologians argue that Melchizedek was not a normal human, but actually Jesus Christ traveling backward in time to appear in the Old Testament. The paradox, if Melchizedek is a time-traveling, pre-incarnate Jesus, it creates a strange cyclical loop. The Bible states that Jesus is a priest after the order of Melchizedek. If they are the same person, it means Jesus' eternal priesthood is based on the authority of himself, serving as his own historical predecessor. 2. The sci-fi and pop culture immortal traveler archetype. Because the text literally states he has neither beginning of days nor end of life. Fantasy, sci-fi, and esoteric fiction have frequently co-opted Melchizedek as the ultimate trope for a time-transcending immortal guide. He's often used as a literary archetype for a character who exists outside of normal linear time, stepping into history at pivotal moments to correct the timeline or offer cryptic, ancient knowledge before disappearing back into the ether. 3. The Shem generational time overlap. In ancient Jewish rabbinic commentary, there is a literal attempt to fix a perceived timeline paradox. Some traditions claim Melchizedek was actually Noah's son Shem. Because people lived for hundreds of years back then, Shem's lifespan would have structurally overlapped with Abraham's. To ancient readers, having a physical link to the pre-flood world living alongside Abraham felt like an impossible compression of generations, a historical time warp in its own right. 6. The Zenzik cube, the missing capstone, and fluid time. The material universe is built upon the Zenzic squaring of limitation, the Euclidean, three-dimensional cube matrix. It binds consciousness within rigid spatial boundaries and linear, mechanical time. The capstone is deliberately left off the pyramid because the system relies on the illusion of an unfinished descent to keep the battery running. However, for those who understand the mechanics, time is not a rigid line. It is materia prima, fluid, raw material. When the cornerstone or the sin angle is mastered within the matrix, the illusion shatters. The goal of true Gnostic alchemical transcendence is to crack open the cellular, carbon-based biological limiters and dissolve the egoic boundary, allowing consciousness to stream back into the unified multidimensional continuum that predates and supersedes this material containment field. Conclusion: the critique of contemporary gatekeepers. Labeling figures like Jason Reza Jorjani as a lower-level gatekeeper of the left-hand path highlights a common frustration within modern heterodox and esoteric circles. Intellectuals who navigate the cutting edge of myth, technology, and traditionalist philosophy often risk becoming trapped in hyper-rationalized ego structures, analyzing the abyss from the edge without actually undergoing the total dissolution required to transcend it. From this perspective, a left-hand path gatekeeper intellectualizes power, sovereignty, and archetypes as conceptual systems to master rather than living realities to dissolve into, ultimately walling themselves inside an intellectualized self-reflection.